We bought this plot after one visit. Just one. A few minutes standing on sloped ground in the middle of a village, and we said yes. I know how that sounds. When we started looking for land, this wasn't the obvious choice. We'd seen other plots before. Flatter, larger, easier to build on. Some of them were beautiful, and most of them were expensive. So expensive that you start doing mental gymnastics just to stay calm. Then we found this one. It was the cheapest one we've seen, and after a tough negotiation, it ended up far cheaper than anything else we'd looked at. The slope was obvious immediately. The flatter part was at the top, what is now our vegetable garden. The area next to the street looked much smaller than it actually was. We only realized that later. That turned out to be one of the nicer surprises. The plot itself was easy to overlook. From the street, it looked smaller than it really was. Many people probably passed by without giving it much thought. Years earlier, it had been a vegetable garden. Part of the property across the street, never a home of its own. At least not as far as anyone could remember. The house would be new, but the place wasn't. Before we bought the plot, we spent some time walking through the village. The car was parked further away, so we arrived on foot, and that probably helped. The village felt established, not planned, not recently built, just lived in. Half-timber houses, stone walls, gardens, narrow streets, a church that has watched over all of it for far longer than any of us. The plot sat right in the middle of the village, at the meeting point of several streets. 5 minutes from the forest. Close enough to disappear into nature whenever we wanted, but still very much part of the village life. We liked that balance. It wasn't just a history. It was the feeling that people were still choosing to live there. There were children on the streets, new houses at the edge of the village, gardens that were cared for, flowers along the roads. The village felt alive, not like a place that only had a past, like a place that still had a future. We visited the plot once, a few minutes walking around, then we bought it. It probably took us longer to choose some pieces of furniture than it took us to buy this land. Most of the project took years. That decision took minutes. Owning the plot was only part of the story. We still needed permission to build on it. And the house we wanted to build was certainly unusual for the area. We spent a surprising amount of time imagining all the reasons why it might not work. Could we build here? Could we build this kind of house? Would it be approved? The questions arrived much faster than the answers. We wanted answers, which meant finding an architect. We contacted 32 architects in our region. At first, we thought something had gone wrong. Maybe nobody had received our email. The silence felt stranger than rejection. 3 replied. That was it. The project didn't fit neatly into familiar categories. It wasn't a conventional house, but it wasn't particularly radical either, at least not from our perspective. Some weren't interested. Others simply couldn't help. So we waited and kept looking. Eventually, one architect invited us to meet. We walked through the project, talked through the challenges, and at the end, they didn't say yes. They said, "Let's try." And that was enough. For the first time, the project began taking shape. On paper, room by room, wall by wall, decision by decision, what had started as an idea slowly became something that could be measured, drawn, discussed, submitted, approved, rejected. And somehow that made it feel more real than buying the land ever did. The plot itself is almost 800 square meters, which sounds generous until you start removing parts of it. 3 meters from the neighbor, 3 meters from the street. The first drawings made it very clear. We didn't need a huge house. Even so, we managed to fit more house onto the plot than we expected. There was one small consequence, though. The north wall of the bedroom and office isn't quite at 90 degrees. We wanted enough space for the two of us. No more, no less. The house is about 104 square meters in total, around 84 square meters of living space. A living room, a dining area, and kitchen, sharing the same space. A small guest toilet, a bathroom, an office that could double as a guest room, a bedroom, a storage room, and a terrace. That was pretty much it. More than anything else, we wanted the house to feel connected to the garden. The largest windows don't face the street. They face the terrace, and beyond that, the garden. Most people experience our house from the street. We experience it from the other side. We knew from the beginning what kind of house we wanted to build. A simple house. And as far as possible, a house built from materials we felt comfortable living with. Straw, clay, wood. At the beginning, the idea was surprisingly simple. Use as little plastic as possible, avoid concrete, build with natural materials. Keep things understandable, repairable. At least that was the plan. The idea sounded simple enough. The reality turned out to be a little more complicated. One example was the foundation. Originally, we imagined something much closer to traditional stone construction. A solution that felt natural on a site like this. But regulations, engineering, practical realities, they all had their own opinions. We spent a lot of time trying to avoid concrete wherever we reasonably could. Eventually, we found another solution. At one point, we thought it would save a significant amount of money. Instead, the number of foundation screws almost doubled compared to our original assumptions. Even today, we're not entirely sure why. Maybe the engineering was conservative. Maybe there were reasons we didn't fully understand. Maybe both. Looking at the drawings today, it's hard to believe how quickly everything happened. The architect's work took only a month or two. The approval process wasn't much longer. But while everything was moving forward, one question never really disappeared. Had we missed something? The plot had been the cheapest we'd seen, by quite a margin. And every now and then we wonder if there was a reason for that. Maybe the plot couldn't be built on. Maybe the house wouldn't be approved. Maybe we would end up making compromises we hadn't anticipated. Nothing in particular suggested that, but the thought was there. The drawings were finished, the documents were submitted, and then we waited. The approval itself arrived surprisingly quickly, which felt almost strange. After months of imagining everything that could go wrong, the answer was simply yes. There were no difficult questions, no major complications, just approval. And part of us couldn't help wondering whether we'd spent far too much time worrying about it. The project had a plot. It had drawings. And after months of wondering whether we could build here, we finally had an answer. Not exactly a plot twist, but we'll take it. Looking back, we were so focused on getting answers and moving the project forward that we probably didn't spend enough time researching some of the technical decisions. Most decisions turned out fine. Some of them deserve their own episode. The roof is probably one of them. If we were starting again today, we would spend more time on that decision. The same is true for some of the details. Rainwater downpipes. Before building a house, I barely noticed them. Now, I see them everywhere, and most of the time, they're simply ugly. And there was one mistake that wouldn't reveal itself until much later, when we started ordering the windows. We just didn't know it yet. The next step was preparing the land, which sounded simple enough. The approval had arrived, the drawings were finished, but the calendar had its own opinion. In Germany, trees and large shrubs can only be cleared before nesting season begins. If we miss that window, we'd have to wait another 6 months. So we had to move quickly. And that's where the real war began. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next episode.